Hi, I'm Bob Parsons, founder of Yam Worldwide, Parsons Extreme Golf, PXG, and GoDaddy.com. This November the 10th marks the 247th birthday of the United States Marine Corps, followed by Veterans Day on November the 11th. Each year, we pay tribute to these anniversaries by partnering with the Semper and America's Fund to provide financial support for our nation's critically wounded, ill, and injured service members, veterans, and military families. Last year, thanks to donors like you, we met our goal, raising more than $23 million. You can help by visiting thefund.org, give what you can, and the Bob and Renee Parsons Foundation will match your donations dollar for dollar up to $10 million. This year, we decided to reshare our video about PTSD and veterans like me who have suffered and are suffering from this debilitating condition. This message resonated with so many people and received so much positive feedback that we thought the very best thing we could do was to send it out again this year, reminding fellow veterans, their families, and others that there's help and hope to overcome this nasty affliction. Throughout history, our country's military members have always stepped up to protect and serve. And while every war has its casualties, they don't all occur on the battlefield. This year, we honor our veterans by shining a light on a subject that only now is starting to get the attention it deserves: PTSD. I have firsthand experience with PTSD, and it dates back over 50 years when I served as a Marine Corps rifleman during the Vietnam War. But first, a little background. I was a terrible student as a kid. I failed the 5th grade and didn't do much better in all the other years. When I reached my senior year of high school, me and a buddy joined the Marine Corps. After graduation, we reported to Paris Island for boot camp and eventually were trained as riflemen. 6 months later, at the age of 18, we were sent to fight in the Vietnam War. I served with Delta Company, 1st Battalion, 26th Marines. My unit operated in Quang Nam Province, where there were rice paddies as far as you could see. Our job was to protect the small farming villages that were scattered throughout and to keep the North Vietnamese from taking the villagers' rice to feed their troops. To do this, we set up on ambush most every night. When I first got to my unit, they were located on top of Hill 190. I learned shortly that my squad was ambushed a few days earlier. They took 5 casualties, 4 of which were fatal. To a man, those killed and wounded were the most senior men in the squad. I was one of their replacements. A Marine named Barry George, who at that time had been in country only 6 weeks and just turned 19, became the new squad leader. Barry, who is a dear friend of mine to this day, turned out to be one of the finest Marines I've ever known. So even though it didn't seem like it at the time, with him, our squad was in good hands. After meeting with the squad, I went and sat on one of the walls at the top of the hill and looked down at the valley. The colors there were intense and beautiful, but as striking as those colors were, I didn't see them because my mind was completely focused on how I was going to survive. I kept thinking, how am I going to live through this? Nobody in my squad has been here very long, and to boot, the Marine Corps tour is 13 months, not 12 months like the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Sitting there on that wall, trying to picture how I'd still be alive 13 months from then, the whole situation seemed impossibly dark and insurmountable. But then something unexpected happened. As I sat on that wall, my thoughts slowly shifted from, how am I going to survive, to, more than likely, this was where I was going to die. I eventually accepted the worst outcome as inevitable, and when I accepted what was my probable fate, I relaxed, felt at peace, the darkness let go of me, and I was able to think. And then I really saw and appreciated those incredible colors of the valley surrounding Hill 190 for the first time. Then I made myself 2 promises. First, I would do everything I could to do my job as a U.S. Marine. Second to that, I'd do what I could to be alive for mail call in the morning. And because I accepted the worst possible outcome as inevitable and never looked further into the future than the next morning's mail call, what initially seemed like an overwhelming situation became something I could deal with. And from then on, I was fine. That very first night, I joined my squad, went on my very first ambush, and got my first grisly taste of combat. A Marine by the name of Ermel Hunt was hurt horrifically by a North Vietnamese hand grenade. We called them Chi-Coms. I hadn't been with the squad for 4 hours when that happened. Just after that, I noticed a Marine named Larry Blackwell was losing his cookies in the adjacent rice paddy, and then just was standing there looking down, apparently in shock. The Huey medevac chopper coming in to pick up Ermel was going to land right on Larry Blackwell. The moment I saw this, I ran and pushed Larry out of harm's way. We both tripped over a rice paddy dike and went ass over apple cart into that nasty rice paddy water. Had the medevac helicopter landed on Larry, it most certainly would have killed him. But because I saved Larry's bacon that first night, he was alive later and probably saved mine. The next night, our point man, a Marine named Ray Livesey, hit a tripwire walking on a rice paddy dike. It triggered an explosion that mangled Ray's legs. There were no medevac helicopters available that night, and I helped carry him about what seemed like a mile to the medevac point. Other nights, the only combat we saw was us fighting to stay awake while lying in ambush in those rice paddies. And night after night, that's the way it went. I did every job I was asked to do. I carried those awkward, heavy machine gun ammo canisters. They weighed about 17 pounds, had metal straps that cut into your hands, and were pain in the tail bulky. Of everything I did there, that was, without a doubt, the most painful. I walked tail end Charlie. It's the safest but creepiest position in the squad. Walking last, always looking over your shoulder for an enemy soldier sneaking up on you. I also carried a radio. It was also bulky, weighed about 25 pounds, had an 8-foot antenna, and because it was the squad's only form of communication, there were no cell phones back then. Carrying the radio was like wearing a sign that said, "Please shoot me first." Eventually, I started walking on the point team, which was how I was wounded. On that night, I was walking second point when we were moving through a village in the dark. Our point man stepped over and missed a tripwire. I wasn't so lucky. I hit and tripped it. I received shrapnel wounds in both my legs and my left elbow from the resulting explosion. I was medevaced to the U.S. Naval Hospital in Yokosuka, Japan, where I spent a few months. Then after recuperating, I received orders back to the bush. But on my way back, through an unlikely series of events, I became a courier of classified documents. I traveled between our units in Vietnam and operating headquarters in Okinawa, delivering operation plans back and forth. And other than an occasional rocket attack, I never experienced combat again. Eventually, my tour was up and I rotated home. When we came home, we soon discovered the USA was a very different place than what it was before we left for Vietnam. To our extreme disappointment, instead of a hero's welcome, or any kind of welcome for that matter, all too many of us were met by protesters calling us names like Nazis, murderers, drug addicts, baby killers, and on and on. We were even told that when we left base to return home, we might want to leave at midnight and not wear our uniforms so we didn't draw the attention of the anti-war crowd. Me and those Marines with me, who were being processed out of Mother Green, wore our uniforms home and were proud to do so. To this day, those of us who served in the Vietnam War remain the only troops who ever fought for our country who were never welcomed home. When I came home, I was a different person in good ways and bad. First, the good. I accomplished things I never would have without the Marine Corps. In spite of my horrific academic history, after working 1 year as a laborer in a steel mill, I was able to attend college at the University of Baltimore and study accounting. And lo and behold, I graduated magna cum laude. I also passed the CPA exam on the first try. Since then, I taught myself how to program a computer and started several successful businesses from scratch, most notably Parsons Technology, PXG, and GoDaddy.com. I am proud to tell you that everything I've ever accomplished I owe to the Marine Corps. Mother Green taught me responsibility, discipline that I could accomplish much more than I dared to dream possible, and that I had a right to be proud. But not all the changes in me were good. Before I served in the Vietnam War, I loved being around people. I always felt like I was part of the crowd. I was, for the most part, a happy guy. But the me that came home was not the same guy. I no longer liked being around groups of people. Everyone seemed so different than I was. No matter what group I was with, I rarely identified with anyone, never felt like I belonged, or even that I wanted to belong. I wrestled with depression, had a quick temper, and was usually on edge, and was always described as one of the most intense people anybody around me ever met. Like most of you, I managed through it, pushing the unpleasant memories and dark feelings back down as best I could when they started. I learned to bury myself in my work, and that, more than anything, kept me going. As the years slipped by, I eventually became aware of PTSD. I kept telling myself I couldn't or shouldn't have it. I didn't see that much combat, just a month. But I now know, and I'm telling you, that 1 month of combat, certainly for me, was more than enough. My life then was more difficult than it should have been, difficult for me, and sadly and regrettably, difficult for those around me. I started my journey to healing in 2010 by getting together with the Marines I served with in Vietnam. I linked up with them on the internet and went to a get-together they had in Gulfport, Mississippi. Just being around other Marines who knew firsthand what I did made such a difference. It was a breath of fresh air. During my journey to healing, I tried a novel and incredibly easy form of neurofeedback provided by a company named Semper. That helped. I also underwent psychedelic therapy. That made a big difference. I had a few stellate ganglion block procedures, which also made a significant difference. Afterwards, I was a different person. I felt like my old self again. People who knew me couldn't believe the change in me. It had been 50 years since I served in the Vietnam War. And for the most part, I was once again like I was before the war. I finally came home. Those of us who took up arms to serve our country are rightly proud of what we did. It was physically and mentally incredibly difficult. But as hard as it was to be brave, and make no mistake, it is never easy to be brave, we stepped up, literally put our lives on the line, and did what we were asked to do. In the process, we saw things no one should ever have to see. And in all too many cases, we carry memories no one should ever have to have. And we learned to endure these unpleasant memories and the dark feelings that come with them, and to deal with our PTSD alone. And because the human brain is incredibly adept at hiding its flaws, many of us, we don't even realize we have PTSD. So if you're not certain you have PTSD, ask those closest to you. They'll know and be happy to tell you. If you think you're experiencing symptoms of PTSD, on behalf of all of us, I'm asking you to step up and be brave one more time. For us, as proud as we are, it won't be easy to admit you need help with PTSD, but this needs to happen for us to make progress. To begin your journey to a better life, please call the Semper Fi Fund at 866-843-7323. If you don't want to make the call for yourself, for God's sake, make it for your family and for your fellow veterans. There's no doubt that many who served during that war saw far more action than I did, and I'm no hero for sure. But I decided to lay all this out to you so you could see that if I had significant PTSD, there's a good chance you do too. I know the feeling of finally coming home is a wonderful feeling indeed. Now it's your turn. You deserve to come home too. So please, go ahead, pick up your phone and make that call. The Semper Fi Fund is waiting to help put you on the road to overcoming PTSD. God bless you, Semper Fi, and on behalf of all of us who served in the Vietnam War, welcome home.